Yo, 1997 Cobra Kai. This thing's suffering from the high performance blues. The previous owner tried to go faster and lower and louder, and well, it got lower and louder. These are the 4-valve 4.6 liters. I see this once in a while when people try to make a high performance vehicle out of their car. They put a clutch kit in it, and it feels like about a stage 5 clutch kit because you push in the clutch and it feels like it's going to blow your kneecap right out. So I just went on eBay and I got a stock pressure clutch from these guys. So the clutch should basically feel real nice and soft. I don't understand. A lot of people think, a higher number's better when you're buying a clutch kit, and it's really not. You only need it if you're getting higher into the horsepower to keep your clutch disc from slipping. And a car like this, a stock clutch, it's going to be fine. And I did get a stage 2 disc though. This has got like carbon in it or some kind of fibers that actually help it grip a little better. And I got a light flywheel with it. Apparently there's a light flywheel already in here, but I just got a new one because they're cheap. This has got the 8 bolts on it too instead of 7 on a normal 4 or 6. First thing I'm going to do is deal with this shifter. I don't know, unscrew this thing. I'm sure a factory one's going to be different somehow. What the heck? I think this just pulls right out. Unplug the cigarette lighter. No money, no jewelry. Looks like I got 2 bolts here. They're 1/2 inch or 13 millimeter. Now I'm going to break out an 8 millimeter and take these 4 bolts out. I think that's all I have to do up here. I disconnected the negative battery terminal too because I got a starter I got to deal with. On the passenger side there's a drain plug. These are just a 3/8 square. So I'm just going to use a regular 3/8 ratchet. I'm going to drain this fluid out because I don't like making a mess. I got some tape dope here to throw on the threads. I got some regular PTFE too. I like using both. That way they never leak. I'll just toss this back in the hole. These are tapered pipe too, so the threads are tapered. So the more you screw it in, the better it seals. I got to get this exhaust down. This is aftermarket. You got a car like this, it might look a little different. There's 4 oxygen sensors on here I need to unplug. These flange bolts and nuts look to be about a 9/16 or a 14 millimeter for all you metric guys. All these nuts and bolts are like amateur hour. These like to rattle loose because they're just regular nuts with lock washers. So what I do is I just put these in a vise and I smash this with a hammer. And it ovals the bolt just a little bit. That's actually a little too much. I got carried away there. So I'll smash it a little bit. And just so long as it sticks like in the first 2 or 3 threads, you know you got it about right. And that just makes a good lock nut. I'm just going to do that with all of these. These flange bolts look to be about an 11/16 or a 17 millimeter for all you metric guys. Actually a 17 is just a little small, I think. I'm going to try to use a 3-foot extension and a swivel socket on these. Now this thing should just fall on your head. Looks like there's a ball flange on one side and a cheesy gasket on the other. I have a couple wires I can disconnect from this transmission. This is a speed sensor wire. There's supposed to be some tabs on each side that you pull up, but they're really cheesy and they're broke. So I should be able to just pull this straight out. I got another one here. I think that's the reverse switch. And it wasn't plugged in right. And this connector's all goofy and butchered. Pull those out of the way. I'm going to stuff them somewhere so they stay out of my way when I take this bell housing off. I don't want to pinch them. I see the tail shaft seal's leaking a little bit, so I'll be replacing that. I got to get this drive shaft off. It's in neutral right now. I got to take 4 bolts off of the pinion. They look like they're all 12.12 millimeter. There's no standard equivalent for that. Well, this is on a slip yoke, so it just slides out. I got a drain pan on the floor too, just in case there's a little bit of extra fluid in the tail shaft. Now on the passenger side, I need to take out this greasy starter. There's 3 bolts on it, and they're facing the engine. And the fun one is the top one. It's way up there. And I just use a series of extensions. As you can see there, I pretty much used all of my extensions, with the exception of my 3-foot extension. And I got a 13 millimeter swivel socket on it too, just to try to make my life a little easier. I'm not going to take the wires off of this starter either, and I don't want the wires to hang on the solenoid. So I'm just going to use a bungee cord, try to be a little creative here, and I don't know, put it like that. That way the starter can just kind of rest right here and, I don't know, do what it wants. Kind of like that. Now I got to get this manual shift cable off, and as you can see, there's a big hole right there. And you're supposed to be able to pry this and just push this up and get it through the hole, but somebody put a washer on the thing, and it's bigger than the hole. If you have the factory stuff, basically all you gotta do, you see that nub in there? I can just get a pry bar and put it on that nub and just pry on this, and then I should be able to just take this thing and move it up. Somebody put aftermarket clutch linkage under the dashboard on this thing too. So in the meantime, I'm just going to get a couple of 1/2 inches or 13 millimeters. And I can just pull this clutch cable right through this hole. If you're doing this on a garage floor, you're going to have to use jack stands and get this car really high up in the air. You can probably get away with just using a jack if you're lucky. But I've been fond of this idea here because I have a Max Jacks lift. And it only goes up like 4 feet. There's no tranny jack for it, so I got a Harbor Freight motorcycle lift and a Harbor Freight transmission floor jack. And I should probably strap it down, but I don't know. I just found a way to do this. I'm going to leave the cross member on it because it helps with that pad. Maybe it'll help keep it sturdy. I don't think I'm going to strap it. I'm going to get these 2 cross member bolts off. These are 13 millimeter. There's a funky little nut on the back. I can just let this down just a little bit. This way it just makes it a little easier to get at these top bell housing bolts. I got a 3-foot extension on a swivel socket, 13 millimeter. Looks like there's 4 on the driver's side, 3 more on the starter side. Somebody put a 9/16 bolt up here. Huh, it's not even tight. Grade 5 all-thread bolt. That's kind of wrong. These say 9.8, the stock ones, so these are metric thread. And these are grade 8. It's not even the right bolt. Thread pitch is off. There's supposed to be 2 more on this metal backing plate, and they're both missing. Now there should be alignment pins that are still kind of holding this transmission in. I can jack it up just a little bit just because. Give the tail shaft a little wiggle. Yeah, it's loose. And it's hitting the shifter. I'm going to let it down as much as I can now. The bell housing's hitting the tub of the car up here. I'm going to jack on the crankshaft a little bit in the front, the harmonic balancer, just to try to tip the engine a little. That board's actually on the pan rail. All these pressure plate bolts are 13 millimeter. This has got bronze over ceramic pucks on it. And they're worn down to the metal here, all the way around. And the other side is just regular clutch material. This clutch kit is way overkill for this car. Flywheel bolts are 17 millimeter. It's stuck. I'm just going to hit it with a dead blow. Oh, there it goes. I'm going to take this plate off for now. These heads have been rebuilt. I see a heat tab on here, and it's actually cooked. The center's melted right off. It's got a little oil on here. It's not dripping from the rear main though. It's coming from the valve cover gasket or something. Now I'm going to get this pilot bearing out of here. Some people stuff this with bread. You pack it totally with bread, and then you get a socket with an extension that's the same diameter here, so it goes in the hole, and you put the socket around backwards, and you can pound it in, and it pounds it out. But I'm going to try to use a slide hammer here. Well, that came right out, but I need to get the rest of it out. The new bearing came with the housing in the pilot. I'm just going to get as much of this grease and goo out of here as I can. Got the new pilot here. I'm going to try to start it. When you pound these in, you can only pound on the outside metal. I'm just going to try to square it up a little bit. I got like a, what have I got here? A 24 millimeter 6-point socket. I can tell it's just a little bit bigger than that bearing cage. That bearing's already pre-packed too, so I don't have to pack any grease in the thing. I want to clean this up with brake cleaner, and I already put that bearing in. I don't want to get any brake cleaner on it. Nothing a little Gorilla Tape can't fix. I have a really big mixing tub underneath the car and a can of brake cleaner. I'm going to make a stinky mess in my garage now. This has what looks to be a factory rear main seal. It's not leaking yet, but I'm going to replace it anyways. I got a straight punch. Well, it's kind of straight anyways. I'm just going to punch a hole in here. I don't want to touch the crankshaft at all because I don't want to damage the surface. I have a drywall screw here I'm going to try to put in this hole now. And it's just pushing this thing right out. It feels like that's as far as it wants to go, so I got a claw hammer. I'm just going to use that. Oh. And it sort of worked. Try to get behind it with a pry bar now. That's an outer dust seal. Now I got an inner seal I'm going to do the same thing with. There it goes. That way I don't have to take this plate off. I don't like taking plates off. As you can see, it's right in between there. And I didn't touch the crankshaft, not even a little bit. Now I want to get in here with some brake cleaner and a rag. I'm just going to soak this rag really good with brake cleaner. I want to get it in between both of these surfaces because both of these surfaces need to be completely dry, especially the crankshaft. There's a chamfer on the very outside of the crankshaft that's just got a little bit of rust and junk on it. I'm just going to take some emery cloth and just hit it just a little bit just to knock all of that old rust and goo off of it. That edge feels really nice now. I'll just hit it one more time with some brake cleaner. The reason why I have the crankshaft dry is because I have a PTFE seal here. I really like these. If you use a regular seal, you have to lubricate the crankshaft, but these seals you're supposed to put in dry, and it actually comes with a cool little seal installer. That's what it looks like. I can just put this piece of plastic right over the crankshaft and just push it in with my thumbs until it gets over the crank. Kind of going in a little hard. That's okay though. I'll just push it in and give it a little friendly persuasion to start it. There it goes. And I can just take a brass strip and just go around in a circle little by little. Just light taps. I'm going to leave this one flush with this plate, and I can just grab a pair of pliers and just pull this installer out. And it's already got a dust seal on it, so I don't need the factory dust seal or anything. Those are really slick seals. I really like them. I can put this plate back on that I usually always forgot until I did about 20 or 30 transmissions. Well, the clutch and pressure plate usually has some oils and cosmoline and junk on them. I'm going to hit some brake cleaner on this. Make sure there's no lint left from the rag on here. I'm just going to figure out where these bolts line up because they gave me 3 alignment pins and I want to make sure they're in the right spot because there's a lot of holes in this thing. Okay. There's a little residual goo on this flywheel. I'm going to take off with some brake cleaner and a rag. Put this flywheel on. It only goes on one way, so I got to keep turning it until all of these bolts line up. I got some blue Loctite I'm going to put on here. Just put a little drip or two on the bolts. I'll be torquing these to 65 foot-pounds. I'm just going to snug them down first. Kind of go a little crisscrossity. I just got to find a good place to stick my screwdriver where it won't break anything. Check them all a couple of times and make sure they're good. I'm going to deal with the shift fork and stuff next. There's little hooks on the back of this. I can just pound it down out of the way and pull this bearing out. More brake cleaner on a rag. I'm going to try to get as much of this junk off of this shaft as I can. I don't really need to sand it or anything. It's actually pretty dry. I want to make sure this slides in and out really nice, and it does. I got some Honda urea grease for this because sometimes Fords need a little Honda love. And if you look in here, there's a little groove inside of here. There's a little recessed area. I just want to fill that flush. It doesn't take much. Just put a little bit of urea grease inside of there so it stays lubed for the life of the life. Stick it in here and work it a little bit. I'm going to put a little more in there. That feels really nice, and I'm just going to wipe off the excess. Put some urea grease on this button too. Just a little bit. Don't need much. I can put a little dab in here too because I feel like it. And this has got little spring hooky dealy things in it. I can just pull back on this, and pop this out, and put this one in its place. Just like that. Oops, not just like that. Just like that. Okay. And I can stick this thing back in here. I'm going to want to make sure these clutch splines line up. Make sure it's the right one. I usually don't do this at all on anything, but I got some clutch spline lube. On these old school big splines, they always kind of required it. So I'm just going to take a little bit of spline lube and I'm going to put it on the clutch. A little bit on here. And I'm going to put this on. I'm just going to work it back and forth a little bit. Move it around. I'm going to wipe off a little bit of the excess. So you don't want too much. You don't want this stuff flying around on your clutch disc. I'll wipe this down a little bit too. I don't know, they do that because there's rust that builds up in between the clutch and the shaft. And it can make it lock up, and apparently that's supposed to help it from doing that. I have a pilot tool here. I can just take my clutch disc, stick the pilot tool in here, put it in the pilot, and it doesn't really center the clutch, it just kind of holds it up there. Oh, nice. All these holes are too damn big. What do I do? Okay, I think I have the right bolts for it now. I couldn't figure out if they were 10-1-5s or 3/16 standards, so I got some thread pitch gauges so I could check them, and they came out to 10-1-5s. So I got some Allen bolts and lock washers in 10mm by 1.5, and I put some blue Loctite on these. Now when I get these started, I don't want to get these bolts too tight because I still want this clutch disc to move around. Because these pilot tools never really center it really good, I want to make sure it's perfectly centered, so I'm just going to stick my fingers in between these holes and I can feel the clutch disc. And I just want to make sure that the spacing is the same all the way around. That actually feels pretty good. And this tool just falls in real nice. If I look down in there too, it looks really centered. So the factory called for 25 foot-pounds on all these bolts. But since I stepped them up to another size, I'm going to add another 10 pounds. I'm going to bring it up to 35 pounds. I'm just going to squish these down a little bit at a time until I get it to flatten out. And that's ready to go. I popped a rear seal in here. Had to look it up. Apparently there's two different transmissions for this car. So if it looks like this, it's a T45. This little lifting tab right here was hitting the doghouse, and I had to jack up the front of the engine just to get the transmission out. And I don't like it. So it's going bye-bye. By the way, you didn't see me do that. Now I just need to line up the thing in the hole with the stuff. The one nice thing about this amazing Ford product is there's a big fat hole where that shift fork is, so I can look at the shaft to line it up with the clutch and stuff. I got it in gear too, so if I have any problems I can turn this shaft a little bit just to get the splines to line up, because those splines are huge. That was about one of the easiest transmissions to line up I have ever done. I found a bell housing bolt I had laying around, probably from some other amazing Ford product from a long time ago. I chased that one bolt up there because it was a little boogered up. There's two bell housing bolts. Two are a little longer than all the rest, and the longer ones go where the alignment pins are. I don't have it pushed all the way up against the block yet, but I can look in that hole and I know I got the clutch spline lined up, and the shaft is in the clutch disc. So I'm just going to start all of these bolts and I'm just going to wiggle it around, and I'm just going to gradually put it in without forcing it. Now the alignment pins were a little goobered up, so it was kind of funky, but I got it in. Now I'm just going to snug all 7 of these bell housing bolts down. I got a 3/8 3-foot extension. Now that I did all of that, I can torque all these down to 55 foot-pounds. Time to do the cross-member bolts, I suppose. I'll tighten these down to 55 foot-pounds too. I think the good book says you should do more than that, but I also think they're smoking big barrels of crack. The seal's already been pre-greased. I put the transmission in neutral too, so I can turn it if I need to. These get torqued to 83 foot-pounds. I'm using a torque stick. Now I suppose it's time for this greasy starter. Try not to get big gobs of sandy grease in my eye. These starter bolts get torqued to 20 foot-pounds. I'm going to give the guy some freebies for this. These are supposed to get torqued to 20 foot-pounds. I'm going to put some transmission fluid in this next. The drain plug's right here and the fill plug's right up above it. This transmission calls for Mach1, which is kind of really old and outdated, so you can't really find it anymore. So I got some premium ATF transmission fluid that says it's good for Dextron 3 or Mach1. It calls for 3 quarts and some change. I'm just going to pump this thing until it starts drooling out the hole. Okay, I put 4 quarts in there, probably a little less. It's full. I'm going to put some sealant on that tapered plug and throw that in the hole. I left a little play in here and I checked the free play on the clutch pedal, and it's still a little loose. I want about a ½ inch of free play, and right now it's at about 1 inch. This is all aftermarket. There's actually an adjustment that's on the firewall too, but I don't want to mess with that one. I'm just going to adjust it right here, and I'm going to get it a little tighter. They say you want about a ½ inch of clutch pedal play with 5 pounds of pressure. The pedal height will probably come up even more with a little bit of clutch wear. Suppose I can plug in some wires. I suppose it's exhaust time. I got a new gasket for the passenger side. The junk faces up. Now everything on this exhaust is a ball flange except for the passenger front, which is just flat, so I'm going to tighten that one up first. Ow! That hit my nose. I feel like I got a bloody nose. I got those flange bolts at about 55 foot-pounds. I do have a bloody nose. Only thing is I'm bleeding on the outside. My nose feels like I'm bleeding on the inside. Typical 3/8 course bolts, so 35 foot-pounds. I'm going to turn these around. Now I just got to connect the battery and call it a job. Okay, bye.